here this afternoon to talk to you about my book, which is right there. As you just heard, it was published late last year in September. And the name of the book is The Riot Report of the News, How the Kerner Commission Changed Media Coverage of Black America. And the book is, I feel, very relevant to what's happening today, especially in journalism, as we talk a little bit about reporting on race and poverty and rioting, violence in American cities. The book also is getting some really good reviews, and I'm hoping it gets better reviews because it's very timely. Because, you know, we all love anniversaries, and the 50th anniversary of the Kerner Commission being named is in July of this year. So it was named in July of 1967. And then the report came out in March 1st of 1968. So the 50th anniversary of that is coming up as well. So that's why I'm hoping that I get a lot of good publicity for the book. And of course, this is the cover of my book here, and we'll talk more about this, but this is our main character here, Otto Kerner. And this is Lyndon Johnson, and this is Roy Wilkins. Roy Wilkins was executive director of the NAACP in the 1960s. And that photograph came from the library in Texas, at the University of Texas, the LBJ library in Texas, of which I visited a couple times and really did most of the research for the book on it, and also got the photos. Okay, well, maybe we should start out by talking about the Kerner Commission. I know all about it, so I have to, assume that not everyone knows everything about it. So, what was the Kerner Commission? Well, first we'll have to start our story back in the mid-1960s. So let's talk about the summers of 1965, 66, 1967. And back then, in many cities, in northern cities in the United States and also western cities, there were a series of riots in African-American neighborhoods in those cities. And in the vernacular of the time, that was the word the ghetto. There were riots, as they said back then, in the ghetto. And again, I'm talking about northern cities. I'm talking about Newark, New Jersey, Detroit, Michigan, Cleveland, Ohio, Chicago, New York, and also Los Angeles, Oakland, California. And what happened was that every summer from 65 to 66 to 67, the riots were getting worse and getting more serious. And then there were hundreds of riots. By 1967, more than 50 American cities in the summer had riots in African-American neighborhoods. And the most serious of which happened in Newark, New Jersey in about mid to late July 1967. And then right on the heels of that was a riot in Detroit. And that was the most serious riot of all. There were more than 44 people killed in the riot in Detroit. And then there were millions of dollars of property damage. And people were demanding that somebody do something about it. And the President of the United States at that time was, of course, Lyndon Johnson. And frankly, he didn't know what to do. So, like a good politician who doesn't know what to do, decides, let's name a commission to study the problem, and then they'll tell me what I should do. So, he decided very quickly in late July 1967, just as the riots in Detroit were just starting to calm down, to name what was called the National Advisory Commission on Civil Disorders. And it was an 11-member group. And its job was to do three things. He asked the commission, he said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to tell me what happened in these riots. I want you to tell me why it happened. And I want you to tell me what can be done about it. And so the Kerner Commission, those 11 members, they got busy right away in July of 67. And they worked really hard throughout the fall of that year. And they issued their report on March 1st, 1968. And the idea was to get the report out before we had another summer of rioting, so give us enough time to do something. And officially it was the report of the National Advisory Commission on Civil Disorders, but that's a really long name. So it was more informally called the Kerner Report. It was also called the Kerner Commission. And the reason it was is because the guy on the cover of the book is Otto Kerner. And Otto Kerner was the governor of Illinois at that time. He was also from Chicago, and he was the head man. So they called it, in short terms, Kerner Report. And basically, what the Kerner Report did was it was so it's a long book. It's at least 200 pages, and it's very well written. And in fact, it became a bestseller after it came out. I mean, it was very well read, and it had 20 chapters in it. And there were all kinds of recommendations about what the government should be doing with it. Well, it got a lot of great press. People loved the report. except for one person, and that was Lyndon Johnson. He hated the thing. In fact, he threw the thing in the trash. He didn't even read the whole thing. The reason he didn't like it was because he thought it didn't give him any credit for doing anything in the last 5 years. Johnson had been president, for 4 years, or 5 years by that time, the whole report said everything he's done is wrong. So he was so upset about the report, he didn't even sign the thank you notes to the members. Okay, so the report, though, is often cited and often quoted, and it's considered a major work in American history and still cited today. You'll hear people talking about the Kerner Commission. Okay, so what's this got to do with the news media? Well, at that time, in the summer of '67, there was a very common belief that all this rioting was happening was part of some conspiracy, maybe even a communist conspiracy, and that it was somebody was behind it. Somebody was stirring up trouble in all these black neighborhoods. And one of the people they felt that was stirring up the trouble was the news media. And remember, television news had just kind of come into being. Television news started in the early 1960s. So by the late 1960s, television news was very influential and powerful. And the idea was if those TV news reporters would just stop reporting and showing the rioting on television, then people would stop doing it. And it kind of made sense. If you were in Newark, New Jersey, and you were watching your evening news and you saw people rioting, you think, well, I might riot here too. So, and the media was to blame. Johnson thought the media was to blame. Congress thought the media was to blame. Okay, it was just that politicians were seeking a scapegoat. And the public generally was dissatisfied with the news coverage. They just didn't think it was a good idea. So one of the things the Kerner Report decided to investigate was what influence TV news, mostly TV news, had on the reporting. And this cartoon kind of shows it here. This is supposed to be a cartoon of Stokely Carmichael, who was an African-American leader at the time who espoused violence. And here he's a publicity-made Frankenstein, and of course he's eating up all these newsreels and headlines and all that stuff. Okay. All right, so what did the Kerner Report say about the news media? Okay, well, I already told you that the Kerner Report was about 20 chapters, and they devoted an entire chapter, one entire chapter, just to the news media. And basically, they did a lot of smart things. As I said, almost all of the Kerner Commission reports were never enacted. But the ones that were the ones about the news media in chapter 15. So what did they really do? Well, they were really smart about a couple things, because they said in the past, whenever like a government commission would criticize people in the news business, they would always be saying, well, that's a violation of free press. You can't tell us what to do. So they decided, well, we're going to take a real scientific approach, and they did something called a content analysis of all the rioting news coverage that had happened the previous summer. And that was a relatively new thing right now. In the journalism business now, we do content analysis all the time, but that time was really new. And then they had a media conference. They got some people together at a retreat in Poughkeepsie, New York. They called all the top journalists in the country and TV news executives together at this private meeting, which was closed to the public, and they talked to them about it. And then they also did interesting things, like they interviewed people in black neighborhoods, and they asked them, do you watch the news at night? What do you think of the newspaper? Do you ever read anything? That kind of thing. And then they even brought into African-American press. The black press at that time was very influential and powerful. It's not so much today, but at that time it was. Okay, and what did they come out with? Okay, well, their final conclusion was kind of that, but again, it was a whole chapter's worth of stuff. But they basically said that, there is no connection between people watching rioting on television and people actually rioting. There's no connection. People don't watch TV and then all of a sudden turn violent. But they did say, here's the problem. The problem really is that the news media is not doing a good enough job of telling people why people are rioting. And people aren't rioting because there's a communist conspiracy or they're watching it on TV. People are rioting because there's poverty, there's racism, there's segregation, there's a lack of jobs. And what the Kerner Commission basically said was, you, the news media, are partly to blame for this problem. But the problem is not that you're not doing a good job covering the rioting. In fact, you're doing a great job covering the rioting. You're telling people exactly how many people are killed and how many buildings have been burned down, and you're running great pictures and all that stuff. But you haven't gotten in depth. You haven't told people, why this is happening. Why is there rioting? Well, rioting is a spontaneous reaction to racism and poverty and segregation and the lack of jobs and oppression. And that's what people don't. That's what you're not doing. So basically, that's their conclusion right there. That the news media, you have a lot of influence and power over people, and you really need to do a better job. Okay. All right, well then what really happened? Okay, our Kerner Commission report comes out on March 1st, 1968. President Lyndon Johnson there throws it in the trash. But everybody else reads it. I mean, most people read it. A lot of people read it. It's great press coverage, by the way. The newspapers just love the Kerner report. And the Kerner report's overall conclusion, which you've probably heard about, is that our nation is moving toward two societies, one black and one white, separate and unequal. And you've probably heard that quote. You may not know where that came from, but that comes from the Kerner report. And what really happened with the news media was they really took the report to heart. They said, you know what, this is absolutely correct. We need to do a better job. There was a marked improvement in reporting on race and poverty. TV stations and newspapers, they got in depth. They really interviewed people. They found out, you know, what's really happening with this. Yeah, I should say this, the riots were mostly in northern and western cities, where people thought, well, we're not racist, you know, in Cleveland, Ohio. But really, the reality was that they were, because African Americans were just as oppressed in northern cities and western cities as they were in the South. And then the newspapers also showed an increased awareness of the plight of minorities. More African Americans were hired in the mainstream news media. And basically, the news media started looking much more critically at itself and what it was doing wrong and what it could be doing better. Okay, so, and then what are my conclusions of the book? A lot's been written on the Kerner Commission. There's even been books written just specifically how the what the Kerner Commission said. But the conclusions of my book are this, that it's not a coincidence that the rioting basically stopped after 1968. Now, there were riots in 1968, especially after Martin Luther King was killed, and then there were riots at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago in 1968. But essentially, the whole issue of rioting in the summer in African-American neighborhoods stopped after the Kerner report came out, and I would contend part of it was because the news media did a better job telling people what the problems were, and people started doing something about the problems. That's the journalist's job, right? Do something about the problem. And the conclusion was that also there was a reporting attention paid to race and poverty, and that can improve society. Journalists have a role in helping improve society by digging in deep, telling people what the problems are, and offering solutions. And if we do that, then politicians, the president, other people, Congress, they pay attention to it. And then my final conclusion, which I really like, is I give a little bit of love and attention to our friend Otto Kerner there, and this is Otto right here. This is Otto here touching the nose of Abraham Lincoln I believe this is in Springfield, Illinois. Abraham Lincoln is buried in Springfield, Illinois. And Otto really is Otto Kerner is really from Chicago, but he spent a lot of time in Springfield because he was governor. Well, what happens with Otto Kerner is after the commission comes out, he is a political star. I mean, they're talking about him running for president, or at least vice president, and maybe a senator, or maybe Supreme Court. Well, he gets a federal judge appointment by Lyndon Johnson, who kind of thanks him. Lyndon Johnson never really thanked him, but gave him this federal judgeship, and so he got the federal judgeship. Well, what happened out of Kerner was he did a few things while governor that were a little unsavory, and then he basically got indicted. He got put on trial for perjury and a few other charges. He did a really bad job defending himself, went to prison, and then got cancer, and then he was let out of prison early in 1976 only because he had cancer. And then he did die in 1976. But right before he died, all the newspapers, there was an outcry around the country from journalists to pardon Otto Kerner, that he was a great man and didn't deserve the fate that he got. So my book does give Otto Kerner a lot of credit, though never a member of the news media. He is a major figure in the history of journalism. And then these are just my questions for discussion. My book basically talks about social responsibility theory of the press. And what I really like is what lessons can we learn from the Kerner report about what we can report today. I think we can learn a lot. And what role does government have a play in ensuring that the news media does its job? Which I think is a good question that I think people in the news business really ought to think about. Thank you.